Well, everyone on Zoom, hello, and everyone here, thank you for joining us. Myself, Brandon, and Alex are really glad to have you and talk to you a little bit today about your estate plan is done. What's next? What other components need to be considered? And so just a little introduction from each of us about who we are, who our firms are. We'll talk about what are the key estate documents that need to be refreshed or considered when it comes to your estate plan and the legal side of things. We'll talk about the non-legal components of a comprehensive estate plan. So things that obviously having the estate plan, the legal side done, first and foremost, is incredibly important. There's a lot of other things that we have going on in our lives that people should and need to know about. And then in closing, we'll offer some solutions and just open it up for questions. I think we have a small enough group here in person, and then also online, we'll be kind of looking at the chat box. So if there's questions as we go, feel free to ask and we're happy to answer those. So I will pass it to myself first. And again, I'm Kylee Bandy, the founder of After Loss Advisors. We support families in two ways. The first is through legacy and estate organizing. So working with people and kind of what we'll talk about in today's presentation to get their non-legal affairs in order. So we're looking at digital estate management, funeral memorial plans, their ethical wills, the things that matter to them in their lives that they want to share with others, and beyond. And then we also support families after they have experienced a death to navigate all of those logistics that typically fall on the family members, that can be overwhelming, that other professionals may not always touch on. So these are just some of the categories you can see on the screen here that we support people in, but not limited to that. A big part of what we do is working with other professionals to bring that care team in place for the families when they need it most. Pass to Brandon.
I went first on Tuesdays.
Oh, great. I'll pass it to Alex.
Great. So I'm Alex Greene. I'm with Campbell. Yeah.
Secrets.
So we are estate planning attorneys. I also do a fair amount of probate work. So if you don't take our advice today and don't have an estate plan, then I generally handle that in our office. And I'll let Brandon talk about what he does.
So for those who haven't met me, my name is Brandon Campbell. I'm one of the partners. I started this business back in 2017, and we have basically two sides of our practice. One is going to be on this estate probate side. We also do a lot of business law, or what we might call corporate transactional law or contracts. And then we do a lot of real estate work in terms of setting up holding companies for sale by owner transactions, commercial leasing, and so on. So we set ourselves up in a way to try and be a resource across a fairly wide spectrum of issues that people might run into. We do have another side of our practice that is all family law. They do it, and I don't know why, but that is custody and divorces and really unpleasant things that we're not going to talk about here. So we're going to talk about happier things like dying. Kylee, I believe. Oh, we are going first. Okay, so when it comes to estate planning, I'm going to start with a little bit of an introduction. Alex is going to give a little bit more comprehensive information about implementing a plan. But the one thing I like to emphasize to people is that something that you call an estate plan or a financial plan or a tax plan is an actual plan. It means you have to do something with it. Simply signing documents or having an idea in your mind doesn't really get you anywhere. We need to make sure that you actually take steps necessary to implement that planning into, come on in. Hi, yeah, you're okay, come on in. We're just getting started with the substance. You need to take steps to implement that plan so it actually does what you are expecting it to do. So with respect to a plan, typically speaking, most people are going to have a similar set of documents. There may be structural differences as to how they create their plan, but for the most part, as an example, every single person over the age of 18 should have powers of attorney. A power of attorney is a legal document that essentially says, I'm going to make my own decisions, I'm going to run my own life. If and when I get to the point that I can no longer do that, here are the next people who stepped into my shoes. These documents are avoiding a series of probate cases that are called guardianship and conservatorship, which are terrible and expensive and time consuming. Come on in.
Thank you.
Okay, you're fine. Come on in. We're just getting started with everything. In addition to powers of attorney, most people who have some form of planning are going to have a set of documents that we commonly refer to as medical directives. These are going to include things along the lines of a HIPAA authorization. This is to make sure that key people in your lives can do something as basic as call a hospital if you've had an accident, as well as a document that's commonly referred to as a living will, which is really focused on dealing with end-of-life decision-making, primarily along the lines of life support decisions. Inside of estate plans, most people are going to have a will. You can call it a simple will, you can call it a last will. There's several different names, all for the same structure. But a will is a document that people leave behind, which is essentially providing a safety net of what happens if I'm gone and we don't know what to do with blank, with the house, or with the person who should be managing things, or with my last tenant. With estate planning, one of the common misconceptions that we like to dispel right off the bat is wills do not avoid probates. That is not their purpose. It never has been. It never will be. So we get a lot of people that come in to see us and they'll say, oh, I've got an estate plan. I've got a will. Well, a will isn't a plan, number one. And if your objective is to not go through probate, the will is not going to achieve that. So when people come in and they only have a will in place, they really have nothing, which is unfortunate. So building out a plan is going to include making sure we have these other documents, but also then taking the steps to make sure that we don't go through probate. And then one of the last pieces here listed here, which is trust. There are a couple ways that we take to not go through probate. Alex is going to cover those with you. One of those is a trust. Trusts are not required. People can choose to have them. I, for example, have a trust because I own a business and if there's complications there. I don't have children as an example, but if I had children that were under the age of 18 or adult children who are not great at being adults, I might use a trust to solve that particular issue. I might use trust for situations where I want to leave things to a person, but they might be considered disabled or special needs. There's a lot of different reasons that we may use a trust, but they're not required. As part of an estate plan, though, people may have a trust, and there's a number of documents associated with trusts that come along with them. So Alex is going to go into some more substantive details about how we actually go through the process of planning. That's just a quick overview of what we typically want to see within a plan. And if you have your own documents, it's always a good idea to make sure that you have everything that we just listed. If you don't have anything in place, this is going to give you a bit of a primer as to what you want to make sure that you do. So Alex, go ahead and take it from you.
Yes. So there's a couple of big steps that come up when you are doing planning. So the first big step is we have to have good documents. So all of those documents that Brandon just talked about, we need to make sure they, have everything in it that they need, they're properly signed, and that they work for the state that you're in and can be taken out of state as well. A lot of people don't realize that your whole estate plan can go with you if you move to another state. So it's important to make sure that they are good and that you take them with you if you leave. The next big step, we're going to talk a little bit more about it as we go through here, is called funding. That's the name we give to it legally. That's just going to be changing asset titles. I'm going to talk about that a little bit. And then the last step I'm going to talk about is just making sure that the people in your life are ready to do this for you. Nobody should find out they're your power of attorney at 2:30 in the morning. That is not going to help any of us. So making sure that we're collaborating with everybody in our life on these things.
Down button.
Down button. Okay. So your estate plan documents that Brandon was just talking about, they are going to be for you. They are unique to you. There's no really generic one size fits all thing here because everybody's lives look different. Everybody's family structure is different. Everybody's wishes about how they see their life going is different. And so we want to make sure that your documents reflect you and your family. They're also going to change over time. So you sign this tomorrow, 10 years from now, your life is going to look different. Maybe there's different people involved in your life. Maybe there's, different assets that you have. Probably don't have the same car. That's a big one. different things change frequently, and we want to make sure that our plan stays up to date with all of that. It's not just do it once, never look at it again. You have to keep looking at it year after year, making sure that everything still looks the way that you want for your life at that moment.
Alex, how do we change documents?
It is super simple to change documents. In our office, we check in with our clients every year, so we're always there to change them, but you just go back to either your attorney, or if your attorney retired, find a new one. Come talk to us, we do it, but always look at it. The first step is look at your documents every year, just make sure the agents haven't changed. For people with young families, kids get older and now you want them to take over spaces. Different things can change like that. If you have new children, that's a great time to update your planning. Buying new assets, that's a great time to look at your planning. And then just in general, if your wishes change, as you get older, things may look different. You may have different wishes. So like I said, we're going to talk about funding quite a bit here. So funding is how we are actually stepping out of that probate world. So probate happens because of how assets are titled. Things get stuck in your name if you pass away and you haven't done anything. So we changed how assets are titled. We do this in two major ways. One is through something we call beneficiary designations. It is a term called TOD or POD on things like bank accounts, transfer on death or pay on death. You may have seen those. That is where we can name the next owner of an asset on the asset itself right now. So if I have a house, I say, okay, if I pass away, Susie gets it, or Susie and Jimmy get it 50-50, or Susie gets it and then Jimmy gets it. You can do that on pretty much everything that you have. Houses, it's a beneficiary deed, bank accounts, retirement accounts, TOD or POD. We can do it on cars. We can do it on pretty much everything. The beneficiary designations are outright transfers of ownership. There are no strings attached. So that works great for some people. It's an easier, faster way to do it. They just take your death certificate down to the county. My loved one has passed away, the house is now mine, or bank account, or whatever it is. There are limitations to this, which is why we look at a trust. Some of those limitations Brandon has mentioned. The reasons you may look at a trust is if there are minors, we can't leave them things in beneficiary designations. 4-year-old can't own a house. Even a 16-year-old can't own a car. They're beneficiaries. Maybe somebody has special needs or disabled. We can't just leave them things if they're on public benefits. Public benefits go away really fast. We have too much money or too many assets. Maybe somebody's just not ready to inherit from us. They're not good at adulting yet, as Brandon mentioned. Or we also can't protect it from third parties. Like what if I want to leave everything to my kid, but my kid gets married and then divorced? We can't protect the inheritance in the event of like a divorce. So we look at a trust in all of those kind of cases, because in a trust, it's a little bit different of how we handle things. It is a legal entity we create while we're alive. We create a trust agreement. You can write pretty much anything in a trust. You can say who gets to inherit from me, when, how much at a time, what are any rules or contingencies around it. We can plan for all the people that I mentioned we can't plan for in beneficiary designations. And because of what it is, it's a little different how we handle assets. So we actually move everything into it right now, which is the funding process. So we put everything into the trust. So I no longer own my house, my trust owns it, or my business, or my bank account, my car, all the different things. So those are kind of the two ways that we are funding the plan. Funding just refers to changing all of those titles, either putting beneficiaries on everything or putting them all inside of a trust. And then, like I mentioned, that last big step is making sure that the people in our lives know what our plans are, what our wishes are. This is something that is really helpful, like pairing with Kylee, making sure that people know what your wishes are, making sure they have copies of your legal documents, any other documents you create regarding your legacy. Making sure you're talking to them before you even make a plan. Hey, I'm thinking of naming you as my medical power of attorney. Are you okay with that? Are you willing to make the decisions necessary to take care of me if something happens? And then once you sign them, making sure those people have all of the documents that you need, and then just making sure that everything is organized. This is often where Kylee comes in as well.
And on that note, this is for everybody's reference, the folders that we have here are some of our resources to this effect. One of these is going to be quite literally a script of how you talk to people. So it's a 2-pager, how to speak with a loved one. Behind here, there are a couple resources. We have more of these available, but things like how do I organize myself, e-information, medical, financial, etc. We have tools we provide for pet planning. We have tools we provide for last remains. We have a lot of different ways that we can help organize. And then on the left side of the folder, very similarly from Kylee, is going to be some of her tools that are just kind of how do we make sure that we've covered all of our bases here. So take a look in these folders. When we send everything out, we will also provide a couple digital packets, which are going to have more resources than what you're seeing in here.
So for everybody online who's not here in person, we are going to send out to everybody online and in person, digital versions of our PowerPoint and these packets that Brandon is talking about. So these are just some of our resources that we just want to link to. We have Bequest. I know Lauren is online.
Hi, Lauren.
Bequest is a wonderful organization, helping just gather professionals that work in this realm. So if you're not familiar with it, please check it out. We also have the Colorado Senior Law Handbook, which is a wonderful free resource. It's updated every year. And it's
Not just for seniors.
And no, it's for everybody. It goes through more information than you would ever believe on all of these kind of topics. And then we have the American College of Trust and Estate Council.
ACTEC, just for everybody's awareness, is it's a national, essentially nonprofit group of attorneys. And if you go to their website, they have videos, they have written resources, they have so many good things for the general public in terms of general estate planning. It is very general though, so it's not going to be specific state to state, but it has great things like why should I sign a power of attorney, or how do I be a power of attorney for somebody else? So there's some really great things on there. So all 3 of those resources are free to the public. They have a lot of great information. They're good to share for yourselves, with your professional resources, and with your families.
If you have any questions for us, I think we'll do it a little bit later, and then I'll hand it over to Kylee.
Thank you. All right, so we just got to hear from Alex and Brandon about the legal side of things, trust, beneficiaries, TODs, PODs. What else? There's a lot more things to know and to consider. So we're going to talk here about uncovering the missing steps, non-legal, to securing your legacy. One of the first sections and one of the first things that I often meet with people and refer them out to people like our lovely pre-need directors that are here today for is talking about final wishes. And so that can look like talking about what are their celebration preferences. Is there a specific funeral home they'd like to work with? In the state of Colorado, there's actually 5 legal options for your burial. And if you don't know what those are, correct me if I'm wrong, but they are flame cremation, water cremation, also known as alkaline hydrolysis, traditional casket burial, which as we know it, there is natural burial, and also composting. Thank you, Jamie. So some great options if you live in the state of Colorado, and some great professionals who can help you dive more into the details of what those look like, how do you accomplish that for your own personal wishes. Something that we work with folks on that side, outside of getting them connected with that type of professional, is really digging into what are your wishes for your celebration, for your memorial? Are there songs you would like to be played? What people would you like to be there? What people would you maybe not like to be there? You never know. And so we talk through what those look like, in addition to other personal requests that may be there. Sometimes people don't want a celebration, or maybe they just want something smaller with the family. And there's no way that we know these things unless we talk about them with our family, with the important people in our lives.
As a side note, one of the great resources we'll be sharing is a planning guide for these topics that was actually developed with one of our professional partners here. And it will give a lot of those categories for people to be able to start thinking about.
So just to repeat for people on Zoom, we have a digital planning guide that we'll be sending out that kind of touches on more of those topics. Another area that with after loss advisors, when we're focusing with people on their legacy and estate organizing, is care instructions. And this is not just for pets. This is not just for children. Sometimes this is for ourselves. What medical needs do these people and animals have in our lives? What are their daily routines? And so I'll going through a few categories within each of these. With pets, we're talking about care details. When do they like to be walked? What routines do they have? Where is their vet? Are they on medication? Can that medication only be given at times of food or not? Again, the things that we know inherently that other people may not know. Similarly for kids, obviously there are legal components that need to be in place for this side of things, but guardian information, where is that guardian information? Have those people been notified? We're talking about what are their medical and educational needs, their daily routines, preferences, and again, those legal documents. Where are they? Do the people who need copies of those? Have they been notified? Hopefully so, but a big component that we talk about with folks. And then lastly, for yourself, if you were to become incapacitated, are the legal documents that you need in place? Are the people in your life who would be supporting you during that time aware of the things that you like to do? Do you like to be outside? Do you have to take medications at a certain time of day? Are there things that you would want to still be part of your daily routine if you were not able to verbalize that for yourself? So again, some of these more abstract concepts that may not be in the legal side, but really important that we consider and communicate with the people in our lives. Directories. So Alex kind of talked about the organization side of things. This is a huge part of how we support families. I call it, let's give them the map to the treasure. Let's give them the maps for everything that they're going to possibly need, again, in the event of our incapacity or death. So we're organizing these things beforehand and creating these really just support with being that solution for guiding people when you can't. I've said this once, I'll say it again. We know so much about our lives. We know how to access our phones. We know how to get into our homes. We know how our pets like to be taken care of. Most people don't know those things that we do. So how are we writing that down? How are we providing that in a way that's easy to access for those moments that maybe we can't? And so some of those categories of that we include in these directories are legal documents, medical information. We already talked about the pet care, the child care, your devices. Where are they? How do we get into the devices? The passcodes to your cell phone, your laptop, where are your extra garage door openers, your spare keys. There's so much, again, that goes on in our daily lives that we know inherently in our minds that many other people don't. So this list is extensive. There's more that goes on it. I also will touch on usernames and passwords. That's a big one. There's some great resources out there that we work with people to set up digital password management. Sometimes it can be a locked Excel file, if that's what works for folks in terms of their comfort level. But again, making sure that at least the list of accounts that we have, where do we bank? Where do we get our prescriptions? Some of those things are things that people have to scramble for if we don't set them up for success with having it ahead of time. Legacy information. So this is also, if you may have heard the term an ethical will, or talking more about the emotional side of things. There's the logistics, right? What we just talked about, the directories, the legal side, the financial side. There's also the ethical side. So an example I've given before, and I'll give again, I'm working with a client right now who is the woman, the matriarch, is an amazing chef. She knows all of her recipes up here. She's a great chef. And she, when we met, and we're talking about this section, specifically said, if something happens to me, when something happens to me, no one in my life is going to know these recipes. No one's going to know the Christmas lasagna recipe. And so a project we've been working on together has been making a recipe book that she's going to gift to her family over Christmas. So things like that are some of the categories, some of the objects that fall into this category, but this can be family traditions. It could be voicemails, some of those things that really mean a lot to people once you're gone. Digital presence. So kind of touched on this in terms of the directory and making sure that people at least know where your devices are, what accounts you have, but there's also things like digital assets that maybe the people in our lives or you own, have ownership of, websites, businesses, blogs. artwork. And then I also want to touch a little bit on, and I'm going to let Brandon and Alex touch on it more, but the Colorado Revised Uniform Fiduciary Access to Digital Assets Act, also known as RFADA. And what that says, it authorizes a decedent's personal representative or trustee, so a legally authorized person, to access and manage their digital assets on their behalf. However, with an asterisk and a caveat that there are specific terms of service by all of these entities. Apple, Facebook, Google, all have their own specific rules about how you can and can't access accounts. And so that is something to be aware of. Brendan and Alex, anything to add on that?
Yeah, so as we're doing planning in this concept of organizing, the digital age has made things easier in some ways and harder in others. The harder side of things is it's very difficult with privacy laws and with just private corporations to be able to do what we expect other people to be able to do for us. So although this law exists, it is not an easy law to actually operate under. So just to give you all an example, Apple is the most notorious company in the world for this. They have fought the FBI, they have fought major organizations, and they win every single time. So the basic issue is, in order to be able to access an Apple account after somebody passes away, you are required to produce an extraordinarily specific and detailed court order to Apple before they'll even let you access anything. And the only thing that they'll let you access at that point is somebody's iCloud account. So as an example, my phone is offline. They will not, whoever's calling me at the moment, they will not open a phone. So that's a problem. Within a lot of these technological programs, and Kylie's going to show you this in just a second, there are mechanisms that exist to be able to identify what we call legacy contacts. On the financial side of things, this is also called a trusted contact. So within your banking, your investments, your phones, your email, whatever it is, I encourage all of you to do a little bit of investigation and determine what all you have the option to create between legacy and trusted contacts. And this will allow other key people to be able to step in for you if you are either incapacitated or you have passed away. One of the important things to understand about some of these laws here is they may not take effect until you pass away. A personal representative doesn't get appointed until a person has died. Well, what if I'm still here and my family needs to be able to access this information? Well, you can't get an order through probate in that because I have not died. So setting these things up in advance are going to be able to make sure key people don't have to jump through all these extraordinary hurdles. And in some cases, there's a story that Kylie's probably going to tell you. In some cases, there is a permanent barrier that they can't get past. And so you might find yourself in a situation where your family just can never access key information, key accounts, and that's going to be a really big problem. So as part of this process here that we're describing for all of you, I will encourage you, take as much time as you possibly can to investigate this and put these structures in place to prevent any problems.
Thank you so much. Yeah, definitely some realms. One reason I work with professionals like Brandon is because there are legal components that fall into a lot of these things, whether it's us setting these things up for ourselves or our families having to navigate this digital space after we've died. The example that Brandon mentioned, I recently met with someone who shared an example of their father had passed away and they did not know the access for his Facebook account. But there were a lot of people messaging on it still, and they just wanted to close it down or memorialize it, which are the two options you have after someone's died. You can, if it had been set up ahead of time with a legacy contact, that son, had he been the contact, would have been able to go in and delete the account or memorialize it. Similarly, you can have the account managed if you send in a death certificate and follow the specific instructions from Meta or Facebook. However, in this example, the son and his brother thought they could figure out the login to get into the dad's account, attempted several times before getting locked out. And then when they did eventually try to contact Facebook, sent the death certificate, Facebook said, we saw that there was unauthorized access trying to log into this account after the date of death. We're considering this fraudulent and against our terms of service. We will not be able to memorialize or close the account now. And so there were no options for this family because they had made some unfortunate choices and just things that they didn't know. and because there wasn't a legacy contact set up ahead of time. So there are things we can do ahead of time. There are things we can do afterwards if we know the steps we need to take. But this digital space we're living in is ever changing and really important. Yeah, Jamie.
I just wonder, do you ever like bring people together and sit in a room with them and be like, okay, everybody open your Facebook account, do this and this and this. Okay, you do that?
Yes, and actually, we're gonna pull those steps up today and send them all out to you when we're gone. It's a personal soapbox of mine that everyone needs to do. And so I might let the folks on Zoom go and we'll send you these slides, but that is one of the things that we will do here together today. Yes, and so thank you for that question. If you didn't hear on Zoom, Jamie asked if we're going to be able to help people actually set up those legacy contacts, and you will all have the information to do that after our call. So a great segue, digital legacies. What does this allow us to do? It does allow for that memorialization or closure of an account. So I don't know if you all have been on Facebook or LinkedIn and have seen folks who have died, and then the account says in memoriam or memorialized. We did that for my dad's account, actually. So it says that on his Facebook account. And the reason we chose to do that, we still wanted to access his photos. We still wanted to see the memories that would pop up each year when we were tagged together. But we also didn't want there to be somebody who was impersonating him or fraudulent activity going on under his account. So there was a layer of protection in adding that component on. Some people choose to keep it open for a little bit and then delete it once they've been able to save photos or do whatever they need to do. So it's nice that you have those options. And what does it allow? So if you do have this person identified as your legacy or emergency contact, there's lots of different terms that's used. They can access the pertinent information they need. Brandon mentioned in the Apple example, it gives you access to their Apple ID, which has a lot of things on there, really. It has your voicemails, your photos, what apps you were using. It won't grant you access into the apps. But when we think about how many apps we have on our phone, I have most of my banking institutions, their app on my phone. So at least it notifies people if there's not a directory in place of, okay, I think they baked at Chase in Alpine or wherever it may have been. So they know that they need to contact those institutions. So here's the part where I'm going to go through it fairly quickly and we'll come back to it for the group that's in person, but some instructions specifically about how to do this with Apple or iPhone. And so this is if you have an iPhone or if you just have, maybe you have a Mac or a tablet. Same instructions, you would want to have this if you have an Apple ID at all, not just if you have an Apple phone. And so there's the legacy contact component. That's the component that will grant you access to the iCloud information after someone has become incapacitated or died. There's also emergency contacts, which I think is a little bit more well-known, but still something I really encourage folks to consider and sign up for. I'll give two examples. One, if you are in a car accident or something and a emergency personnel is trying to contact the appropriate people, this is one way that they can find who those people are if it's set up accurately on your phone. And how we can dive more into how that looks on the phone if we have any specific questions.
There was a message that just popped up that somebody in the group couldn't hear.
Oh.
I don't know.
Quiet in here. Oh, that's an AI note taker. Sorry, AI note taker. I think they just want us to have more messages, but another reason emergency contacts are important just in general life. I actually found a woman's iPhone in a Target parking lot a year ago, was able to access her emergency contacts, call her mom, immediately say, everything's fine, but I found this person's phone and get it back to them really quickly. So you think about our aging population and elderly folks who may lose their phones more frequently, this could be a really great way to get their devices back to them. Google is a really important one. A lot of us have Gmail accounts. A lot of us use Google Drive for online storage. And if you have an Android phone, more often than not, Google is the managing partner for that phone that you can set that legacy contact up for. I know a lot of people who I've worked with have wanted to access the emails because maybe things like invoices or bill statements, or again, we don't get a lot of physical mail these days, at least not junk mail. And so how are we knowing when things are due? Sometimes it's in someone's email inbox. And so having access at least to see those things can really be helpful down the road. And then Meta. So Meta, for those who don't know, is the overarching parent company that has Instagram, Facebook, WhatsApp. I'm sure they have more, but those are the three big ones that I know today. And so just setting that legacy contact, there's very simple steps to do it once you're logged into your account. And it's an important way that can help set your people up, your family up for success to close or memorialize things when they need to. Again, we'll send this out, and in person, we can actually spend some time doing it if anyone wants help. So that is it for today. We'll open it up for questions online or in person, and I have our chat kind of open here, so feel free to put them in chat or come off mute, whatever works best. And then just in the meantime, here's the contact information for myself, for Brandon and Alex through Offer Campbell Beck, and we really appreciate you all being here with us today. Thank you. Thank you.
They're all out. What questions can we answer?
I have a question.
Yes.
So this was kind of interesting that you guys touched on this, but I was at a funeral recently and there was somebody there that nobody wanted there. How do you make that? If somebody says, hey, I do not want this person, it's a drama person, I don't
Yes.
want them at my funeral. How do you even do that?
So one of the tools we give, it's like a 3 or 4 page memorial services guide. And it's literally you fill in what your specific requests, people, plans, whatever it is are. So on mine, just as an example, I have no Sarah McLachlan music. It's so ridiculous that, so you say what you want, and then the people who are stepping into your shoes are there to carry it out.
But I will tell you from a pragmatic point of view, I work at a funeral home. It really depends on how much you don't want that person there.
Yeah.
If that person is dangerous, this happens sometimes, that if that person is dangerous or has done something really significant, we might hire security to make sure that person doesn't come. So that, it really has to depend on how badly do you not want them there? Is it really, oh, I wanna kind of, you know, it's a last kind of screw you.
Yeah.
Or is it really, and that person can't be.
That's a great question.
Questions can be answered.
Kylie, do you work with folks in other states? And if so, it's yes, but then when do you find that you're meeting with clients? Like, is it when they know somebody is sick, or how are you getting in contact with people?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I'll just repeat it for Zoom. Nicole asked, when does after loss advisors meet with clients, at what stage in their life needs? And on the legacy and pre-planning side, it can really be whenever. I think similarly to an attorney saying, if you're 18, you need some sort of legal document. Technically, yes, there's planning that could be done and organizing that could be done. On average, I'm working with people who are in their 50s to 70s who maybe have experienced the loss of a spouse, a family member, someone important in their life that they saw how awful it can be if they're not organized. And so often that's when people are coming to me if they have a life event where they realize that there's more that they could be doing. I have worked with families where they have had a terminal diagnosis and they're wanting to speed things up and get things as quickly organized as possible. So on the pre-planning side, it does vary. On the post side, it can be as immediate as I've met with someone the day after their spouse died. And often I'm not helping them with the logistical side of things until we have copies of the death certificates. But that's when I'm getting them connected with somebody like Jamie or Joanna, a funeral home, to get things put in place for their celebration. Their memorials, their burial choices. So I can at least help them get connected. We're going to support them during that time and start to work with them on creating the plan when they're ready, because there's a lot of grief at that time, of course.
And you said yes to outside of Colorado.
Yes, and they do, yeah, work with folks, obviously in person only in Colorado, but outside of Colorado, I've worked with folks in New York, Illinois, and California, so nationwide. Yeah, thank you for asking.
David Bavard, I'm seeing more and more properties either wanting to be purchased or sold through the family trust. And typically, if it's not a cash transaction on a purchase, they've got to purchase on behalf of an individual.
If it's a living trust, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's 2 major types of trusts. There's living trusts, which are tied to an individual or couple that are still alive.
Right.
And then there's irrevocable trusts, which are going to be separate legal and taxable entities with their own EIN, their own banking, their own financial life. So when a person is purchasing a property, refinancing a property, something like that while they're still alive, the title company is typically going to require them to have that property in their individual name. And then we can move it to the trust afterwards.
Yeah.
If the person is deceased though, and their trust has changed over to being irrevocable, that trust will be able to transact business. It can do loans, it can buy and sell property, it can do whatever needs to be done. So it really just depends on the legal structure of the trust.
We're always happy to answer questions. We're right down the hall.
Yeah,
On this.
We're upstairs.
Yeah. Done.
Hey Lauren, would you be able to unmute for a second? If you can hear me?
I think she had some sick kiddos at home today, so
Oh.
she may not be able to, but
That's a.
Yeah.
Any other questions we can answer? Well, anyway,
I would like to ask a question, and when you start comparing cost of establishing a trust as to maybe just go with the will and go through probate, can you compare the cost of those two alternatives?
Yeah, so there's several things to consider when you're trying to do one or the other. It really kind of depends on what your goals are. Probate is a little bit more, it really depends on kind of what comes up. We have cases that cost similar to a trust. I have cases in probate that cost a lot more than what we charge for a trustee, for example, in our firm. But when you're going through probate, you're subject a lot of the times to the laws or to how the will is structured, and depending on what your goals are, there may not be the proper avenues to get to what your actual goals are, if that makes sense. So sometimes in a trust, you can really lay out like, I want this to be handled this way, I want to leave money over here to this person, and I want there to be rules around it, like we can say, you know, I want this chunk of money to pay medical bills for somebody, or for. It really depends what your goals are. The trust is also just a lot easier for your family members to manage after. So there's no delay. The problem often that we see with probate is there's a delay. You have to file, you have to get appointed. In Colorado, usually that takes us 2 weeks to a month after we file, and we can't even file until the person's been deceased for 120 days, so that's another week. 120 hours, sorry. Oops. For a week, 120 hours. So there's a delay in, like, if, you know, a bill needs to be paid, or we're constantly giving money to somebody or something like that, there's a delay in our family's ability to do that.
one of the complications people don't fully understand about probate is it's not just probate for the person that passes away. There can be separate and additional probate cases that have to be filed resulting from that. So like an example is if I pass away having 3 children that are under the age of 18. Well, they can't inherit from me directly. So I passed away and probate was open for me. But now each of those children have to have somebody appointed for them called a conservator to receive their inheritance and manage it until they become adults. So we have one case for me, and now we have 3 separate probate cases for the children. So typically cases like that, you're looking into the tens of thousands of dollars to be able to administer, because not only do you have to file and go through those cases initially, but then the cases for each of the children last until each child turns 21. So if I have a child that's 3 years old, that's 18 years of probate that has to be managed for that one specific child. So there can be kind of like it's almost like a spider web that starts getting created of all the complexities that are involved. And then you have everything beyond the legal. You have all the tax filings, you have the financial planning, you have any number of pieces that come in that really cause a lot more broad complication. So generally speaking, estate planning, it's not only avoiding just ending up in probate, it's avoiding a lot of the costs, the time, and the incidental issues that result from that.
Does that answer your question, Earl?
It's a very long answer to a very simple question.
And no, that's what I expected. I mean, but I've been looking at the 2 options and they're very comparable in cost up front. Now, if you do have a trust and someone passes away and then, I don't know, would you still need an attorney to make an appearance in probate, or how does it work? And then all of a sudden you say, well, we got a trust, so I just didn't know how that worked.
Yeah, as long as the trust is properly funded, which was that piece that I was talking about, everything is titled properly into the trust. You don't always need an attorney. I mean, we have people come in who just want help kind of navigating what a trust looks like. They just want to explain it, but that takes me maybe an hour of my time versus a probate case where they're paying me for hours upon hours of my time. But no, a lot of people do it without ever talking, like the people running the trust after somebody passes. They do it without ever talking to an attorney because the trust document really lays out everything that they need to do.
And again, you don't go through probate.
Yeah,
If
no.
your assets are in the trust, so it's not like you have the trust and now you still have to go open the case or something like that. You just don't go through probate entirely.
Great questions.
Any
Anything,
other questions?
anything online? All right, well, I will sign off online, and then for folks here in person, if you want to spend more time going through the legacy contacts, happy to do that. Otherwise, really grateful that you all joined us today, both online and in person. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.